Deuteronomy 23 through 27. I'd like to use the next two videos just to summarize where a lot of these miscellaneous laws that we've been reading about in Deuteronomy, where they can be summarized, or just some final thoughts really as we get close to the end of Deuteronomy. As you have been reading, it is shocking how much these laws can bounce around, and we often wonder what does one have to do with the other. So these are some random thoughts. There's no particular order. Frankly, if I did this again in another month, I might have a different list. So these are things that come to my mind as I read through here, and have been doing this for many years. There's an unknown rationale behind a lot of these laws. The one I want to mention, and again we can do this with many, but is in 14:21, where it says, "You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk." Well, Jews to this day don't know why that is. Now, this is the basis of kosher, or one of the parts of kosher, and that is not mixing meat and dairy products together, either in production or in eating. It comes from that verse, but really most Jews would admit that in context, well, we don't know why God or Moses here prohibited boiling a kid in its mother's milk. One option, by the way, and this is debated among Jews even today, is that chalav, milk, could be repointed with different vowels as chelev, which would mean fat. Don't boil a kid in its mother's fat, which would be a proverbial way of saying don't kill two generations of animal at the same time. So that's one argument. So just be aware that even to this day, many of the laws come to us with a reasoning that we're simply not given. Another one that is very important, I think, what I'll call upward trajectory. The example I would give here would be in 23, 16, and 17, where it says that a slave does not need to be returned to its owner if he or she escapes. Now that's universally unlike all the other ancient Near Eastern law codes. The point is, there are numerous times, not always, but numerous times where you can find a sense in which Israel's laws through Moses are moving in an upward moral trajectory from where they had been in times past in the culture that Israel lived in. I think this will be true of polygamy. By the time we get to Jesus, polygamy basically will not exist. Slavery still will be there, but it'll have different rules to it. We could also add to this genocide. By the time you get to Jesus, that is not going to be the case. How about imprecatory prayers? You would never hear Paul saying what David does in the Psalms. Why is that? Because there's within Torah and then within Scripture itself, this upward moral, ethical trajectory that the law itself will presume. Here's another one that will be happening quite a bit. We have three basic ways of living in the day or in the land of Canaan. You could be an Israelite, a full-blooded Israelite. You could be what's called a resident alien. That would be like a Ruth in the book of Ruth. She comes into Israel and she wants to live by the laws of the land, a resident alien. A third category is called a foreigner, and you'll sometimes hear that as a stranger. The laws will treat these three different kinds of people differently, and sometimes you'll have even, well, like interest. This is in 23, 19, and 20 of Deuteronomy, where you get to charge interest to a foreigner, but you don't get to charge interest to someone who is an Israelite. So just be ready for this to be part of the discussion. This will lead to much further discussion farther down into the New Testament as to how to love your neighbor as yourself. Who are we talking about? And you could see an argument almost break out before we get to the New Testament as to who is to be defined as the other. Another one that, well, we just have to say it this way, I think, room for discussion. Some of these laws that we'll read almost sound, they're so ideal that they are ripe for abuse. One of the laws I enjoy is where it says, if you see your neighbor's ox, don't hide. you're responsible to go get that ox, take it to your neighbor. In other words, what the law is arguing for is a vigilant kindness. Well, how do you say that in law? Thou shalt be vigilantly kind. Well, no, we have these examples of if I see my neighbor's ox, I don't hide behind a tree. Well, what counts, right? And so this, by the way, is where Talmud today is discussed. The Talmud is 36 volumes, 1,000 pages each, of law codes from Torah that were developed orally at first and then written in about 600 or so, 4 to 600 AD. And even today, you can go to a synagogue and talk Talmud, study Talmud. And what do they talk about? This is exactly what they talk about. What qualifies as hiding from my neighbor when I see his ox? So just be ready for this as part of law, room for discussion. One more today, and then we'll do 5 more tomorrow, is what we're going to call case law versus general law. Now, this is important because in Deuteronomy 24, we have verses 1 to 4, we have a story of divorce. If a man divorces his wife for issues of uncleanness, and then she remarries and he divorces her or he dies, then the first husband can't marry again. Now, notice that is not a general discussion of marriage. In fact, there are no general laws about divorce and remarriage in the Torah. What we have is a case law, a special law that apparently had developed because of some issue. So again, our temptation is to take these laws at face value and apply them to, well, ourselves, of course, even in the New Testament era. But be ready for some of these to be very specific case laws that were never mentioned or described in such a way as to be applied across even Israel at that time. So we'll do this tomorrow again with numbers 6 through 10.